Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Robin Stamper, the Artistic Director for Opera Tampa, and I'm so very pleased to be here with Melissa Misener, our resident stage director, an amazing performer herself, and our artistic administrator. One of the favorite questions asked by opera conductors and directors and opera lovers in general is, what is your desert island opera? And mine is La Traviata. Why? Because A, the story is so real and so touching. The music is absolutely so beautiful. And I mean, it just reaches in and digs into your heart and rips it out. Not that I desire that on a desert island, but it certainly is gratifying and cathartic in many ways because it reaches so many different emotions. It's considered one of the middle period operas. Of the famous ones, we have his Rigoletto, Verdi's Rigoletto, Il Trovatore, and Traviata. And one of the things that makes Traviata so real is, A, it is based on a real character, and B, is there's nothing about gypsies or overblown curses or ridiculous situations involving a court jester and his daughter that he keeps in his house, and she unbelievably believes this Duke is a poor student and even loves him after it's been proven that A, he rapes her and he's a scoundrel. It's nothing like that. There are no babies tossed into the fire or anything like that, like in Trovatore. It's all real. It's a situation that actually could happen, did happen, and could happen again today. And one of the great things having Melissa here is Melissa's actually stage direct La Traviata before. So she has a lot of experience with the story. And it's one of those operas where, yes, for every character is important, but in Il Trovatore, there are 4 characters equally important. In La Traviata, not the other characters are not important, but it really revolves around her, all about Violetta.
Yes, Violetta. So the character Violetta is based on a real life person, as you mentioned, Maria Duplessis. And to understand the story, you really have to understand the context, because you have to. She was a courtesan, right, in Paris in the 19th century, and even though it was the underworld of society, it was also the most opulent part of society.
Very glamorous.
It was extremely trend-setting. If a courtesan, a very expensive courtesan, were to wear a certain hat with a particular feather, well, then all of the women of decent society would go out then and get a similar hat with that kind of feather in it, because they were what created the trends of the day. And they wouldn't necessarily be, the courtesans wouldn't necessarily be invited to tea at anyone's house that was decent, right? And that's the sort of the terms that they would use. But they were the fashion trendsetters. They were the whole opulence of that society at that time is really understated. I mean, you can't express it really. I mean, Marie Duplessis, the actual courtesan that Violetta's character is based on, her weekly flower budget was larger than an average Frenchman's salary.
She must have been good at what she did.
Annual salary. Well, and that's the thing, is that, it wasn't really based on anything particular that she's doing, but instead how much she is worth. And so showing your worth as a courtesan at that time was more important than the actual value of the money. And it was just such an opulent time and space, where if I can afford to be seen with this courtesan, then I show my wealth and my power. And so it was very much about showing how powerful and rich the men were by swimming in such opulence.
And yet she's been admired so much by this young man of a reputable family, and he actually convinces her at this party that he's for real and his love for her is for real. And they decide to go out and live in the countryside together. But there's a problem, because his family is reputable. Along comes Papa Germain. And this is one of the most tragic parts of the opera is watching him finally convince her, even though Alfredo, very well, I mean, what's your opinion here? Do you think that she would have lived longer had she lived the rest of her life with Alfredo, which she doesn't because Daddy Germont comes and breaks it up?
I mean, I think she knows from the moment that we see her in the opening scene that she's sort of on borrowed time, right? She knows she's got tuberculosis the entire time, whether she shares it with Alfredo, or anyone else for that matter. She sort of has this in the back of her mind all the time. Maybe she would have lived longer had she had him by her side that whole time, but she also kind of sacrifices what is left of her life in order for Alfredo's life to be less tumultuous when it comes to his family. And this is actually mirroring Verdi's life, because Verdi also had a lover who was an opera singer, who had a couple of illegitimate children, some rumored to be Verdi's children, and his father did not like it, and so he was not allowed to marry the woman that he actually loved because of these Victorian era societal norms, which now don't look so normal, that someone would not be able to be seen with someone else because they had a child out of wedlock. That seems sort of absurd to us now, but that was very strict, and that's why it's really important to understand the context, because we don't think it's a big deal nowadays. You can sort of consort with whoever you like, and no one's going to judge you for it. But back then, in that time, I mean, that was serious, very serious to be even seen speaking with somebody who was not reputable, So it's very like life and death situation.
Well, it's interesting also that you point out the similarities in Verdi's own life, because his writing and his lyrical writing in this opera, to me, I find to be some of the most heartfelt music that he ever wrote. So his relationship with the story must have affected his writing.
I think so. So the real life story of Marie Duplessis, there's a novel you can read. It's a short little book, but in the opening passage of that book, it talks about her after she's died, and she sort of died alone in her apartment, and although she was completely alone in her death, when she does die, the book describes a line around the corner of the building where she lived to try to get inside to auction off
her belongings.
bid on her belongings, because that whatever was in there was a fashionable courtesan owned, and so that was something that was very glamorous.
But compared to the opera, in the opera, doesn't she sell all of her stuff?
Yes. Yeah.
Had she not sold it all in the short story?
Yeah, well, whatever was left, they were going to bid on. The difference really between the actual novel about the actual character and Violetta's story, Verdi sort of puts two characters and makes them one character in the character of Flora, which again is going to be played by our local wonderful mezzo, Jordan Blair,
Yes.
Super exciting. And also at the end of the actual story, the real life story, we don't see the lover and his father come back and be there when she dies. She actually died alone in her apartment.
Yeah.
So that's sort of it's not exactly a happy ending that Verdi put in there, but at least we have some accountability for the suffering at the end, which is something that feels like very vindicating, right?
Exactly.
To see Germont.
See what you did.
Yes, and
Yes,
he's regretful,
Right.
So we get to see this regretful moment on our villain, right? I mean, he's really the villain of the story, which also played by our homegrown
Giancarlos
Rodriguez, who played our Johnny Skiki last season, or
Alfio,
2 seasons
yes.
ago, and our Alfio in Cavalleria. So we're super excited about him returning to the stage.
And speaking of casting, Hannah Brahmer. She was the first winner of the D'Angelo competition, which incidentally will occur again in January. She is a marvelous soprano. She have actually covered the role of Violetta in Sarasota. And she sang the most gorgeous audition for me, and we're very, very excited to have her back. Very beautiful soprano.
So this is a role debut for Hannah.
It is.
Lovely.
It is. And she's gorgeous. Her voice is gorgeous. She's a very empathetic person as well as performer. So
And her real-life husband is actually cast in the show, too, isn't he?
He is the Marquis.
Alex Boyd is
Yes.
playing Marquis.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
wonderful.
It's all very incestuous.
That's great. They're excited.
We're also very excited to be using the Florida Orchestra, and I think, well, because of the orchestration is so rich, Maestro Francis is conducting our Don Giovanni, and we have an Israeli conductor, Naum Avril. The first time Opera Tampa has hired a female conductor to conduct Hansel and Gretel, and yours truly is conducting La Traviata. There are many, many heart-wrenchingly beautiful melodies in La Traviata. It's why, part of the reason is why it's my desert island opera. None more heart-wrenching than during the course of Act Two, after Violetta has finally decided, through the persuasion of Alfredo's father, Germont, to leave Alfredo. He doesn't know why, Alfredo does not know why, but Violetta sings this powerful goodbye to him. The opera does not end on a happy note, but I'm going to leave you on a happy note and go back to the first act where Violetta and Alfredo are exchanging a toast. It's the Libiamo, one of the most famous excerpts from Traviata. If you ever come to one of our Opera Tampa Singers events, there's a fairly good likelihood that you're going to hear this number, Libiamo. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me here. You are a wealth of knowledge and personality, and it's always a pleasure doing discussions like this with you. Thank you so much. And thank you, audience, for being with us. We hope our tickets are on sale, by the way. Right now, you can find them at operatampa.org, and we hope to see all of you at the opera.